Order. Rosie Duffield to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Twigg, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairship today. The Equality Act, passed by a Labour government in 2010, protects people from discrimination based on 9 protected characteristics: age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. The Act has a commendable objective: to prevent people from acting on their prejudices and disagreements in a way that results in the discriminatory treatment of others. It exists not to eliminate difference or ensure conformity, but to foster good relations and tolerance between different groups. Sometimes rights clash, and the very few examples of that clash have played out as publicly, as discordantly as the clash between sex and gender identity. That is, the rights of biological women, and sometimes men, and the rights of those who change their social gender to transition to women. Significant feminist gains have been made in policy and law since the women's liberation movement of the 1970s. These gains include recognition of specific rights and services for women on the basis of their sex, be that hospital wards, prisons, rape services, domestic abuse shelters, lesbian dating sites and clubs, women's health organisations and women's sports teams, spaces that meet our specific requirements as women. These gains are being eroded by the blind acceptance by some, including by policymakers in this place, that anybody who identifies as a woman de facto becomes one. At a time when male violence against women and girls is at epidemic levels in the UK, women's single-sex spaces could not be more important. Our desire to be kind, inclusive and accepting are worthy and valuable human traits. It's this pursuit of tolerance which underpins our law on discrimination. These are... Oh, certainly.
Can I commend the Honourable Lady for Canterbury for her stance and her courage and her wise words as well, and put that on record? Does the Honourable Lady not agree that respect is a two-way street, and whilst we should respect someone's belief, we ever been inching towards a place where biblical or questioning a view is taken as an offence, which I treasure, as the Honourable Lady treasures her biblical beliefs. I fight for anyone to live their faith in as much as it doesn't lead to harm or injury. Does the Honourable Lady not agree that this is the approach the government must take as well?
Thank you, Mr Twigg. Thank you very much to the Honourable Member from Strangford for his point, and I agree that all of those should be protected, and are in fact protected under the law. Our desire to be kind, inclusive and accepting of worthy and valuable human traits is this pursuit of tolerance which underpins our law on discrimination. These are essential in a pluralistic democracy where we can acknowledge, navigate and respect our differences. Yet there has become a tendency in polarised debates, particularly around sex and gender, to treat holding an opposing belief from one's own as not merely a point of disagreement but as a moral defect in the person to whom one disagrees. This is so clearly demonstrated by the terms that have been used for women who think that our biological sex matters, that it is a material reality that can't be changed, and it's entirely different to gender identity, gender-critical women like me. Nasty, puerile terms, many unrepeatable in this place, but often repeated ad infinitum across social media. Bigot, Nazi, fascist, TERF, which is trans, exclusionary, radical, feminist, are just some examples. Extreme, nasty, certainly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to my honourable friend. I wonder if she is aware of the case of my constituent, Ros Adams, who was employed as a counsellor and support worker at Edinburgh Rape Crisis. She was investigated for potentially transphobic views, having asked how she would respond to a women's service user who asked the sex of a support worker who identified as non-binary. Does the honourable member agree that the targeting of women of gender-critical views in turn targets women advocating for women's services, especially for women survivors of rape and sexual assault?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr Stewart, and thank you so much for raising that case, which it shocked and I think piqued quite a lot of people, that just advocating for single-sex services when it's more vital than ever got Ros Adams into so much hot water, which is absolutely unbelievable, and good luck to her. Extreme, nasty and degrading names used for women and sometimes men who don't accept that biological men can be women, such as TERFs. Such name-calling, ironically, is often used under the guise of being kind. Gender-critical women are frequently shut down, told to be quiet, or told it's not right to use accurate language to describe our bodies. Words matter and language matters, and material reality matters infinitely. There are situations where sex matters and the rights of women and girls must take precedence. Women and girls must be able to use language to describe our experiences and not be persecuted for causing offence or distress. To believe in women's sex-based rights and publicly advocate for them results in being readily labelled as hateful or transphobic. However, I am gender critical because I am a feminist and care deeply about the rights of women and girls. I do not, and never have, seek to destroy the rights of trans-identifying people or any other group of people. But my sex-based rights as a woman have nothing to do with those other groups of people. Gender-critical beliefs are legally protected philosophical beliefs under the Equality Act 2010 following the Forstater Employment Tribunal case in 2021. The tribunal found that Maya Forstater's beliefs, which she sincerely holds, are widely shared, based on fact and reflective of the law of the land. And yet, despite the Forstater judgment 4 years ago, there's been an unprecedented run, a steady stream of similar high-profile and costly employment tribunal cases involving gender-critical beliefs that point to a problem that many in this place refuse to acknowledge, including, I'm afraid, the very minister opposite me in this debate today. The normalisation of visible hostility towards anyone expressing widely held gender-critical beliefs, even on our own green benches, has been framed as an expression of solidarity with trans and non-binary people. Those within organisations that sign up to expensive re-education programmes and diktats on all employees signing off emails with pronouns, many of which misrepresent the law, all legitimise the constant, passive-aggressive, soft or even aggressive and opening bullying of those who refuse to comply. Those who disagree with gender-critical beliefs routinely stigmatise women like me as bigoted, a view that arises from a total misunderstanding of what such beliefs are or the motivations of many of those who share them. The social and financial costs of voicing gender-critical beliefs and challenging assumptions in their workplace mean that many are afraid they cannot afford to speak up. And day after day, people who raise concerns about boundaries, single-sex spaces such as changing rooms, are still being disciplined, dismissed and hounded from their workplaces. Two such cases currently attracting huge attention are those of the Darlington nurses and Fife nurse Sandy Peggy. Their tribunals have brought the clash of rights into sharp relief. Few people reading that when adult female nurses challenged their employers to stop biological men changing in the women's changing room could believe that they were disciplined. I have yet to speak to a single British voter who believes a man should have whatever access he desires to spaces where women are getting dressed or undressed for work. But our evidence base is limited, as academics are so afraid to research this area, in fear of ending up hounded out of their jobs, such as academics Kathleen Stock, Jo Phoenix and Laura Favaro, many others I could name. Yet the body of evidence is growing. In their rapid evidence review on harassment and censorship to inform the Khan Review, published in March last year, More in Common found significant anecdotal evidence of harassment faced by groups of gender-critical activists. Gender-critical people face outsized levels of harassment in their everyday lives, leading to self-censorship at a scale which should alarm anyone who believes in liberal democracy, including gender-critical MPs who have yet to speak up in public. Gender-critical people face severe consequences of engaging in the debate, which can range from social ostracisation to loss of employment and loss of livelihood. All of this for holding three core beliefs: that women, adult human females, are materially definable as a class of human being, that women are culturally, legislatively and politically important with our own set of needs, rights and concerns, and that women have the right to meet and discuss freely that which affects our lives profoundly. Certainly.
I'd like to take the opportunity to also acknowledge the bravery of the Honourable Lady in standing up for what she believes in. And does she agree with me that there is a wider political danger to all this form of indoctrination and extremism about gender and sex? And that is that if the only people in politics who are prepared to speak out about it are extreme right-wing movements, then it is actually pushing ordinary people in the direction of political extremes when mainstream politicians are too afraid to say anything.
Thank you so much for raising that point. It's so important. I mean, just me speaking up as a left-wing member of the Labour Party, I've been called a Reform member, all kinds of the names that I've mentioned in here, and it's been suggested that I join a right-wing party. Yet, actually, an awful lot of the articles I read agreeing with me are in the Morning Star. I think people don't really listen to the kind of ideology behind our beliefs and why we speak up for the rights of working women, which is what the Labour Party was founded to do. So I thank him very much for raising that point. We have a duty in this place to ensure that people who hold these beliefs are given the respect they're entitled to. We need to find a workable solution that respects everyone's beliefs and protected characteristics. I'd like to finish by paying tribute to the brave and incredible women, all who know that only women have a cervix, and some men who have stood up to their hounders at great personal and financial risk to themselves. Maya Forstater, Alison Bailey, Jo Phoenix, Rachel Mead, Ros Adams, Denise Farmy, Eleanor Francis, Almut Gaddo, Laura Favaro, Amelia Sparrow, Jenny Lindsay, Kathleen Stock, Rosie Kay, Selina Todd, Rosa Friedman, Lizzie Pitt, and my dearest turf friends, Jo Rowling, Suzanne Moore, and Supreme Shiro pioneer Julie Bindel. These women are just the tip of the iceberg. I was elected on a manifesto pledge to make the country work for working people. These are the working people who are being persecuted for their legal and respectable beliefs. They continue to be let down by cowardly leadership. I've been hounded, harassed, sidelined and briefed against by a party now in government. It's time they got to grips with this issue, perhaps by following the lead of the incredibly brave women I've referenced here, and the unsung foot soldiers who fight for women's rights in the workplace the world over. Thank you.
The question is, this House considered gender critical beliefs and the Equality Act 2010. Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Twigan. It's a real pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I would like to start by thanking the Honourable Member for Canterbury for raising the issues that she has raised this afternoon. I'm going to call it more of a discussion than a debate, because I think the purpose of this session is to explore how we can express our beliefs freely, frankly and respectfully, upholding our shared values of tolerance and freedom of speech. Now, championing freedom of expression is critical, even when beliefs are varied or opposing. To be protected under the Equality Act, a philosophical belief must be genuinely held, and more than just an opinion. It must be cogent, serious, and imply to an important aspect of human life or behaviour. In case law, gender-critical beliefs have been recognised as such, which this government acknowledges and respects. The protection of philosophical belief under the Equality Act is one of the foundations of freedom of expression, ensuring that individuals can hold and express deeply held convictions without fear of discrimination, harassment or victimisation. This protection creates space for diverse beliefs in a democratic society. We must not forget that in many countries across the world, such protections do not exist. Therefore, we should not take them for granted and must continue to view freedom of expression as a right, not a privilege. We must strive to protect freedom of expression for all, whether we agree or disagree, because we should challenge, probe and inquire, not shut down or silence. Of course, we will always protect the right not to be discriminated against, harassed or victimised. The Equality Act
prohibits discrimination and harassment on the basis of a number of characteristics, including a person's religion or belief, sex, sexual orientation or gender reassignment. That is why the Equality Act is crucial in protecting us all and why we are proud to uphold it. Given the polarisation of beliefs on sex and gender issues and the disagreement and discomfort such matters can provoke, I am glad that the Honourable Member has been measured and considered and respectful and promoted a tone and quality of discussion that refuses to lower itself to the politics of division and anxiety. Let's carry this example forward beyond this chamber. It's important we continue to protect freedom of expression for all. And the Honourable Member has set out some examples of where the law has protected those freedoms, but we must strive to support people's freedom of expression in the first place, not simply rely on the courts. I give way.
The Honourable Lady for giving way. And I was just wondering whether she will agree with me that in terms of the kind of freedom of expression, but also those protected characteristics, that we must do all that we can within policy to avoid a hierarchy of which of those protected characteristics are inadvertently or perhaps deliberately at times considered to be more important than others, that it's essential that we keep that level playing field within that legislation.
Minister.
Well, indeed, these are very tricky issues, and sensible discussion on them rather than polarisation is obviously the way forward. And we must remember, of course, we have a collective responsibility to express our beliefs respectfully. By consistently adopting this approach, we can all help to lower the temperature of discussions about sex and gender issues, fostering a more positive and inclusive environment where everyone can contribute without fear of being cancelled or silenced. I'll give way.
Does the Minister accept that in recent years being respectful of others' views has actually meant silencing those who have gender-critical beliefs, and that continues to be the case, although we do see some signs of the tide turning? And it is in fact up to this Labour government to ensure that those views are respected genuinely, not silencing those with gender-critical views.
Well, Mr. Twigg, I think that's just what I've been explaining what I've been explaining about the Equality Act and about the respect for all established views, including gender-critical views. So we want to make sure that everybody is treated with dignity and respect, and that's why it's very important that we uphold the Equality Act and provide everybody with the reassurance that it protects them against unlawful discrimination and harassment. And I think it's important perhaps to just dwell on the issue of what is harassment under the Equality Act for a moment. Free speech is protected when it's lawful, but harassment is behaviour that the law specifically defines as unlawful in certain situations, such as the workplace. Harassment is not simply a case of taking offence. There is a seriousness threshold. Conduct that's trivial or causes minor offence will not be sufficiently serious to meet the definition of harassment. Harassment is a serious matter involving being subjected to unwanted conduct of various types, as set out in the Equality Act, which has the purpose or effect of violating the employee's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment for the employee. And those who seek to harass people at work will not be tolerated, hence our provisions in the Employment Rights Bill to keep workers safe from harassment. And establishing these parameters is essential to maintaining the healthy and respectful standards of discussion I just mentioned. I think it's also important to highlight that these discussions affect real people, their communities, their careers and their families. Therefore, as we exercise our freedom of expression, let's do so with humanity. We hold our beliefs everywhere we go, which often means that we express them in different places, including at work. The Equality and Human Rights Commission has produced guidance on belief as a protected characteristic, and we would expect employers to refer to this before taking action in any case. Now, we know that single-sex services are important to people for many different reasons. For example, single-sex services can provide safety and comfort, especially for those who've previously had negative experience using mixed-sex services. Everyone should be able to access specialist services and everyday facilities that meet their needs, whilst protecting their privacy, dignity and safety. However, as outlined by various ministers in this government, we know that there will be circumstances where certain groups need to be excluded from single-sex services and facilities to ensure the best outcomes for users: safety, dignity, fairness, privacy, to name some. That's why we are proud to uphold the Equality Act, which already gives providers the flexibility to deliver single-sex services exclusively for those of the same biological sex, where this is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. Well, indeed.
Way again. She'll be aware that the last Conservative manifesto committed to reforming the Equality Act to protect single-sex spaces and services for women and girls, particularly listening to the voices of those women across the country. And periodically, the Labour government has indicated it agrees with this. However, when will it take action? Will it commit to taking action, and if so, when?
I think the point that the Honourable Lady is making is that there does need to be some clarification on guidance in particular, and she will probably be very well aware that the last government did make a call for evidence. They asked people to provide examples of how the Act was being interpreted. Now, the Equality Act sets out that providers have the right to restrict the use of services, including toilets and women's refuges, on the basis of sex and gender reassignment in circumstances where it's a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. Now, we're proud of the Equality Act and the rights and protections it affords women. We'll continue to support the use of its single-sex exceptions by providers. It's vitally important that the service providers understand the single service exceptions in the Equality Act 2010 and feel confident using them. The government's committed to ensuring that there is guidance in place which gives service providers assurance about the rights afforded by the Act and how to lawfully apply its single-sex exceptions. We will be setting out our next steps on this work in due course. And as you may well know, the Equality and Human Rights Commission has published guidance on separate and single-sex services. And they've also recently concluded their consultation on their draft updated Code of Practice for services, public functions and associations. Thank you, Campbell. Give way.
The Minister for giving way. She mentions the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which agree with me that on the issue that she's mentioned several times about the need for understanding and empathy to allow the space for people to have various views, that should also be shared by the likes of the Commission and other bodies whose responsibility it is to carry out the functions of their bodies and to ensure that people understand and know that they have an empathetic hearing within commissions like that, and they aren't very much seen as being opposed to the views of gender-critical people.
Well, indeed. I mean, they have a very, very responsible position to interpret and ensure that where there are potentially conflicts between the different protected characteristics, those are dealt with in a sympathetic and fair manner. And in terms of their updated Code of Practice for services, public function associations, we will be considering their proposals, and ministers will make a decision as to whether to approve them after the final draft of the code has been submitted. And as I mentioned just now, we did have, under the previous government, this call for input on single-sex spaces guidance, and over 400 policy and guidance documents which fit the response criteria were submitted under the previous government's call for input on single-sex spaces. And after reviewing these examples, it was found that the vast majority did not wrongly state or suggest that people have a legal right to access single-sex spaces and services according to their self-identified gender. In fact, only about 10% of the examples submitted seem to have misinterpreted the Equality Act single spaces provisions in some way. And as the independent regulator of the Equality Act, the EHRC is the appropriate body to ensure that this is looked into in more detail, and it has the ability to follow up directly with the organisations if necessary. We're in the process of sharing all of the submissions which met the criteria of the previous government's call for input on single-sex spaces guidance so that they can review these. Although guidance does exist, including from the EHRC, the result of this call for input suggests that there is further work to do to ensure everyone has clarity about how the single-sex exceptions in the Equality Act operate. Moving forward, we will explore the best ways in which we can give providers assurance about the rights afforded by the Act and how to lawfully apply its single-sex exceptions. Our beliefs have always played a fundamental role in shaping our identity, purpose and direction in life. At times we share these beliefs with others, fostering a sense of unity and belonging. Other times our beliefs may differ, leading to discord. However, discord does not have to propagate hatred. Progress hinges on our ability to respect different beliefs, even when they challenge us. We must cultivate a culture of safety, one that encourages open expression without fear of discrimination or harassment, rather than a culture of silence. While our beliefs matter, it's equally important to look beyond them and recognise the shared values of tolerance, respect and fair-mindedness that connect us. As we move forward, let's hold on to these values and remain vigilant against attempts to erode them. True progress and equality lies not just in defending our own beliefs, but in upholding the principles that allow all voices to be heard with dignity and respect. Thank you, Mr. Frick.
The question is that this House will consider gender critical beliefs in the Equality Act 2010. As many of that opinion say aye, or the contrary no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order.